So we'll get started. Welcome back to Growing His Kingdom Bible Study, and we're in the series Job at the moment. This is our third Bible study now. We're going to be starting off in chapter 2. So if you want to turn to your Bibles to Job chapter 2, verse 1. Give me a second to get there.
Because I'm lost.
As you remember last week, we were talking about how all these bad things were happening to Job, and he still had the beautiful faith and love in God. And said one of the more profound things that are said in the Bible is after all of the things that he lost, and he still said, "Blessed be the name of the Lord." You know, he's all in on God. His faith is beautiful, as God says he's a perfect and upright man. So now we're diving into Job chapter 2, verse 1, and I'll go ahead and read it. We're actually going to do the whole chapter today. I was going to stop us a little short, but I ended up only having 3 verses to go, so it might go a little longer than the past 2 Bible studies, but let's get into it. All right, so chapter 2, verse 1. Again, there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said unto Satan, From whence comest thou? Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro in the earth, and from walking up and down in it. And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil, and still he holdeth fast his integrity, although thou movest me against him to destroy him without cause. And Satan answered the Lord and said, Skin for skin, yea, all that man hath will he give for his life. But put forth thine hand now, and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse thee to thy face. And the Lord said unto Satan, Behold, he is in thy hand, but save his life. So went Satan from the presence of the Lord, and smote Job with sore boils from the sole of his feet unto his crown. And he took him a potsherd to scrape himself withal, and he sat down among the ashes. Then said his wife unto him, Dost thou still remain thine integrity? Curse God and die. But he said unto her, Thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaketh. What shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil? In all this did not Job sin with his lips. Now when Job's 3 friends heard of all this evil that has come upon him, they came every one from his own place. Now, bear with me here, these names and places, they're kind of hard to pronounce. So, Eliphaz the Temanite, and Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, for they had made with an appointment together to come to mourn with him and to comfort him. And when they lifted up their eyes far off and knew him not, they lifted up their voices and wept. And they rent every one his mantle, sprinkled dust upon their heads towards the heaven. So they sat down with him upon the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and none spoke a word unto him, for they saw that his grief was very great. Now, going back up to chapter 2, verse 1, people just coming in. So this is, again, there was a day the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them to present himself before the Lord. And the Lord said unto Satan, From whence comest thou? And Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro in the earth and walking up and down in it. Now, this is the second time that the sons of God, which the angels, came to present themselves to the Lord. And it's the second time that Satan said he's going to and fro in the earth and walking up and down in it. And actually, I talked to Pastor Vance about this, and he actually had a really good way of explaining it. Is that Satan? I mean, he has no lack of sinners that he could come across and find, but again, he can't do anything without God's authority, without God's okay. He can't do any harm to anybody. He's got to go through God before he decides to do anything. And so he's just walking to and fro and up and down earth. He can't do anything without God's permission. And this is when he's presenting himself to the Lord. The Lord said unto him, he said, Hast thou considered my servant Job? There is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil. And he still he holdeth fast his integrity. Although thou movest me against him to destroy him without cause. Still after everything that has happened, Job has shown Satan and God that his love and faith for God is strong, and his integrity in his faith is unlike anybody else's at the time. So even though obviously Job doesn't know about God and Satan talking and God allowing Satan to put forth his hand and try to destroy him, it didn't shake his faith. He didn't allow the bad things that are happening in his life to turn him away from God, which in and of itself, with what he has gone through, is a beautiful thing. And I mean, that means Satan failed in his first attempt. You know, he failed to turn Job away from God. He failed to have Job curse God to his face. And even though there was no cause for it, even God himself says that Job is a perfect and upright man. You know, his faith is strong, and he still allowed Satan to do this to him, not to harm Job, but to teach not only Job but Satan that these people, that Job's faith is so beautiful and so strong in God that nothing Satan does to him is gonna affect his faith in God. Absolutely.
And I like to think about on there Job's testimony. God's the one that's like, hey, have you seen my servant Job? I think that's amazing to think about his testimony. So that tells you what kind of man Job was. But in addition to that, a lot of times today we think that, you know, if we're close to God and we're doing the right thing, that life is now suddenly going to become easy. But Job is a prime example that is not the case, right? He's doing everything, and God's basically saying, have you considered this guy? Look how much he follows me. Look how much he serves me. Look how much he honors me and all these things. And that's when all of these things take place. Mm-hmm. So it's just kind of interesting.
That's exactly right. And like even right here, I put even after, like, you look at what he's lost already. You know, last week we talked about it. He lost 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 oxen, 500 she-asses, his 7 sons, his 3 daughters. Yeah. Like, and does anybody remember what he said? No? Nope. He says, if you look back in chapter 1, verse 21, naked I came out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord give, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord.
Yeah.
That's what he says after all of that was taken from him. It's such an incredible act of faith, and I always thought that was one of the more profound statements in the book after everything that he has gone through. Like, it's just incredible. Moving on to blessed be the name of the Lord. Right? As Christians, we all need to strive to have the love and faith like Job does. You know, you lose everything. You want to turn away from God. You want to blame God. You want to curse Him, and you don't understand why. But we, as followers of Christ, we know that God allows these trials and tribulations to grow us in our faith and prepare us for anything that's to come into the future. And through it all, he still worships God, and I think that is an incredible testament to his faith and what we should all strive for. Moving on to verse 4 and 5. And Satan answered to the Lord and said, Skin for skin, yea, all that a man hath will he give for his life. But put forth thine hand now, and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse thee to thy face. Now, skin for skin is Satan's response here. And he believes that Job's faith is strong enough to withstand losing his possessions and his family, his property. But if he was to be harmed physically, or if he was to become ill, or if he is to be tested in that way, that for sure he would curse God to his face. After losing everything, and then he puts forth his hand to harm him physically, and he's already lost everything. Satan thinks for sure that he will curse God to his face because of this. So, in turn, the Lord said unto Satan, chapter 2, verse 6, Behold, he is in thine hand, but save his life. Now, the question that hit me was why and how. Why did God say first not to harm him in chapter 1, and now in chapter 2 he's allowing Satan to harm Job? How did Satan convince God to change his mind? Does God change his mind? I thought he's all-knowing, and he has his plan for all of us. But I talked to my pastor again about this, and he was able to help me work through it, and he explained it perfectly. Is that this is not God changing his mind. This is not God changing his plans, and it's not Satan being able to trick or convince God or anything like that. This is, you look back in chapter 1 and now again in chapter 2, he's the one that presents Job to Satan. He's the one instigating it. He's the one accelerating it. He is the one he already knows the end. He knows how Job's going to act. He knows how Job's going to react. And he's the one it's almost like he's testing Satan in a way, showing him that Job's faith and love for God is so strong that go ahead, test him. This will grow him, and it'll be better than he could ever imagine later. It's God. He's the one that is bringing Job to Satan and allowing Satan to do these things, just to test Job, to test his faith and to grow him in his faith. Yeah, you look back at. I lost my spot here. Sorry. Yeah, you look back at chapter 1. Satan says, God says to Satan, "Hast thou considered my servant Job? There's none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil." He's the one bringing him to Satan. Just like in this one, he says in chapter 2, verse 3, the Lord says to Satan, "Hast thou considered my servant Job?" Again, he's the one bringing Job to Satan. He's the one allowing this to happen to test Job's faith And that's why, that was the question I had is, why is he allowing this if he already said not to touch him? He's the one accelerating what's happening to Job. It's not Satan going behind God's back or tricking God or convincing God of anything. This was God's plan from the beginning. Again, this shows nothing happens without God allowing it. This is his plan from the beginning. God suggests Job to Satan and allows these things, but will not allow Satan to destroy him. He literally says, but save his life. So he has full control, and this is what he had planned from Job for the beginning. Verse 7. So went Satan forth from the presence of the Lord, and smote Job with sore boils from the sole of his foot unto his crown. And he took him a potsherd to scrape himself withal, and he sat down among the ashes. And I actually found a quote about this that is this the one? Oh yeah. So this kind of shows, this quote that I found shows like the patience that you have to have. God has a plan for you. You have to be patient. You have to learn to understand that God has a plan for you and that these things are testing you. You have to get through all of these things to grow yourself, grow your faith, and grow closer to God. And this quote I thought was a really cool quote that it's from, what's his name here? Sorry, lost my spot. Charles Spurgeon is his name. It says, did Job learn patience among his flocks or with his camels or with his children when they were feasting? No. He learned it when he sat among the ashes and scraped himself with a potsherd. I went the wrong way. Sorry. Scraped himself with a potsherd, and his heart was heavy because of the death of his children. Patience is a pearl which is found only in the deep seas of affliction, and only grace can find it there. Bring it to the surface and adorn the neck of faith with it. I thought that was a really cool quote. I thought the only way that you can grow and be closer to God is being in those, like Pastor Vance says, being in those valleys and understanding that God is the one, His glory, His righteousness is the one that pulls you out of those afflictions and molds you into what He wants you to be. I just thought that was a really cool quote and way of putting it. Chapter 2, verse 9 and 10. And said his wife unto him, dost thou still retain thine integrity? Curse God and die. But he said unto her, thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaketh. What, shall we receive good at the hand of God? Shall we not receive evil? And all of this did not Job sin with his lips. Another question arose while I was putting this all together. Why was his wife spared? Lost all of his kids, all of his livestock. He lost everything. But his wife is still there. I mean, nothing ever comes up in the Bible about it right at this point. I think possibly it was because it was another way of making Job suffer, maybe. You know, she's suffering greatly because of the loss of her children. That, seeing her suffer that'd kill me. And it would make me suffer even more, you know. Her scorning him when he's sitting in the ashes. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways you can look at that, but I just thought that was an interesting question. Why was she spared in all of this? Just something to think about. also stands there and almost mocks him. You know, like, why do you still have your integrity? Why don't you just curse God and die? Like, it's another way of making him suffer. But what does Job do? He calls her a fool and says, "What, shall we receive good at the hand of God, and shall we not receive evil?" I mean, he, to his wife, the one that he gave his life to, you know, he's like, "No, I know all these bad things are happening, but you don't turn away from God. You turn away from evil. You sheweth evil, not God." I mean, like he said in chapter 1, "The Lord give, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." And still, after everything, Job's faith was not shaken. He did not sin with his lips. Many people think believing in God protects them from evil. So when bad things happen, they question God's goodness or his authority or justice, if he is just or not. But the message of Job so far is that you should not give up on God when he allows trials and tribulations, because he's testing you. He's testing you in your faith, preparing you for not what is to come in this life, or not only what is to come in this life, but also he's preparing you for what is to come after this life, which is another thing that should really set hard in our hearts as Christians, is that these things, these tests, all these bad things that happen that are making you stronger. They are making your faith stronger. But it's not to prepare you for 10 years down the road. He's doing all of this through your life to prepare you for eternity, for your job in heaven, for your rewards in heaven. He's preparing you for what comes after this. Which I think is a very important aspect of this, is we're not tested with these trials and tribulations because he is trying to grow our faith just right now. He's trying to grow us for what he is preparing for us, for our everlasting life with him. Job 11 through 13 here. Now when Job's 3 friends heard of all this evil that was come upon him, they came every one from his own place. Eliphaz the Temanite, and Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, for they had made an appointment together to come to mourn with him, to comfort him. And when they lifted up their eyes afar off, and they knew him not, they lifted up their voice and wept. And they rent every one his mantle, and sprinkled dust upon their heads towards heaven. So they sat down with him upon the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and none spoke a word unto him, for they saw that his grief was very great. Now in Job's day, renting or tearing off their mantle or robes, and sprinkling dust upon their heads and lifting their voices is their way of rendering their grief. And that's how the sitting together for 7 days and 7 nights, it's called sitting Shiva, and it's a time for spiritual and emotional healing, where mourners join together. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I've gone through quite a bit in the past 2 years, and that kind of reminds me about Job. But what he has gone through, I wouldn't even be able to begin to know how to handle it or what to do. And it's unbelievable, the horrible things that is happening to him, but he is still true in his faith and loves God. And that is a true testament to being a follower of Christ, is these things that happen to you. They're going to happen to all of us. I mean, we're all sinners. We all deserve death. until we get to that point, we're going to go through all of these trials and tribulations. And once we get to that point and we are at the gates, at the judgment of God, and or our judgment from God, it's how we handled these situations and did we turn away, or did we give our life fully over to Christ? And that's what we need to keep in our minds when these bad things happen. I mean, yeah, it's hard. We're human. We're gonna falter. We're gonna have self pity, and it's hard, especially when bad things happen to you. But you always have to keep in mind that these things are to grow you closer to God and to prepare you for what He has in glory for you for eternity. And it's hard, but you can always look back at Job and see that it could always be worse, and you just do your best to love God and to praise God and to give Him all the glory, the good and the bad. He's doing it to better you and to bring you closer to Him. Next week we'll be starting chapter 3, but for now I'm going to turn it over. We're going to do our time of prayer and fellowship. I'd like to thank everybody that came in today and everybody online.